May 4th, 2007, 9:45 p.m. Greensburg, Kansas. Population 1,500. A quiet farming town in the middle of nowhere. The kind of place where everybody knows everybody, where the biggest attraction is a giant hand-dug well and a meteorite the size of a boulder. Tonight the streets are calm. Porch lights flicker on. Families are settling in for the evening. But 60 miles above their heads, the atmosphere is doing something it rarely does. Something was wrong. Earlier that afternoon, meteorologists at the Storm Prediction Center had been staring at their screens with a growing unease. The models weren't showing a normal severe weather day. They were showing something else, something that made experienced forecasters sit up straighter in their chairs. Warm, moist air was pouring in from the Gulf. Cold, dry air was slicing down from the north. And high above, the wind was twisting, shearing in a way that meteorologists call extreme. By late afternoon, the Storm Prediction Center issued a rare and chilling designation, a particularly dangerous situation. It's a phrase forecasters don't use lightly. It's reserved for the days they fear most. Something big was coming. Nobody yet knew exactly where. By early evening, radar operators in Dodge City watched a single thunderstorm cell begin to organize southwest of Greensburg. It wasn't behaving like the others around it. It was rotating, slowly, then faster. At 9:19 p.m., the National Weather Service issued a tornado warning for Kiowa County. Sirens began to wail across Greensburg. Some families didn't move. Tornado warnings were common out here. Most storms passed a few miles off, dropped some hail, and left. People had heard this siren before, but this time something felt different. Storm chasers converging on the area were radioing back descriptions that made even veteran forecasters go quiet. The rotation wasn't just present, it was violent. It was widening. On radar, it looked less like a storm and more like a machine assembling itself, piece by piece, in the dark. At 9:38 p.m., the tornado touched down. Witnesses would later describe a sound like a freight train that never stopped, a roar that seemed to come from everywhere at once. At first, it was just a funnel in a field, illuminated by flashes of lightning, small, distant, survivable, people thought. But then it grew, and grew, until it was no longer a funnel at all. It was a wall, nearly 2 miles wide. This was not going to be an ordinary tornado. And what happened next would turn Greensburg into one of the most devastating tornado strikes in American history. The National Weather Service radar showed a debris signature so massive it was almost unreadable. Homes, cars, trees, all lifted and suspended inside the vortex itself. Meteorologists watching in real time understood immediately what they were witnessing. This wasn't a typical EF3 or EF4 storm. This was an EF5. Winds exceeding 205 miles per hour. The strongest, rarest, most violent classification a tornado can receive. Only a handful are recorded in a given decade, and it was heading directly for the center of town. Inside Greensburg, the sirens screamed without pause. Families dove into basements, storm shelters, bathtubs, closets, anywhere they thought might hold. Cell service began to fail. Power lines snapped. Streetlights flickered out one by one, plunging the town into a darkness broken only by lightning and the pale, churning wall bearing down on them. For those who could see it coming, there was no time left to run. Only time to brace. At 9:45 p.m., the tornado tore directly through downtown Greensburg. What happened in the next several minutes has been described by survivors as less like a storm and more like the town simply ceasing to exist. Roofs peeled away like paper. Brick buildings that had stood for over a century collapsed into rubble in seconds. Vehicles were thrown across streets like discarded toys. Trees were stripped bare, then uprooted entirely, then gone. The hospital, a structure meant to be a place of safety, took a direct hit. Staff and patients huddled together as the walls shook and the ceiling gave way above them. The high school, the churches, the grain elevators that had marked the skyline for generations, flattened, one after another, as the tornado carved its way through nearly the entire footprint of the town. And then came the twist that made this disaster different from almost any other in American history. The tornado didn't weaken as it crossed the town. It didn't skip. It didn't lift. It stayed on the ground at maximum intensity for almost the entire width of Greensburg, grinding through block after block with sustained, catastrophic force. Most tornadoes fluctuate in strength. This one didn't ease up, not for a moment. By the time it finally lifted and dissipated northeast of town, it had been on the ground for over 22 miles. When the roar faded, an eerie silence replaced it, broken only by rain, cries for help, and the crackle of downed power lines. Communication was virtually gone. Roads were impassable, buried under debris, downed trees, and twisted metal. Emergency responders from Greensburg itself were now victims too. Their own homes destroyed, their own families unaccounted for. Word didn't reach the outside world quickly. For a critical stretch of time, Greensburg was cut off, a town in ruins, with no way to call for help, and no way for help to know how badly it was needed. But in the chaos, ordinary people became something else. Neighbors who had lost everything began digging through rubble with their bare hands, searching for others before official rescue teams could even reach the town. Farmers arrived with tractors and heavy equipment, clearing roads that ambulances couldn't yet pass. A volunteer firefighter, having just lost his own home, spent the night pulling survivors from collapsed buildings instead of searching for his own family, trusting that someone else would find them first. They did. Stories like his repeated throughout that night, again and again. Strangers who became rescuers, neighbors who became family. In a town reduced to rubble, human connection became the only infrastructure left standing. 11 people lost their lives that night. Given the scale of destruction, officials would later say it was remarkable the number wasn't far higher, a fact attributed largely to the timely warnings and to a community that, for all its shock, refused to stop fighting for one another. When daylight came, the scale of what had happened became impossible to comprehend. Nearly 95% of Greensburg was destroyed or severely damaged. Homes, schools, the hospital, City Hall, businesses that had operated for generations, gone in under 10 minutes. To put it in perspective, imagine an entire American town, its complete infrastructure, its history, its landmarks, erased almost as fast as it takes to watch this sentence unfold. Aerial footage taken the next morning showed something that looked less like storm damage and more like a war zone. Foundations where houses used to stand. Streets you could only identify by the shape of the debris piles. A town that had existed for over 100 years, unrecognizable in a single night. If you're looking for another unbelievable tornado story, click the video on your screen now and watch my documentary on the 1997 Jarrell EF5 tornado, one of the most terrifying tornadoes ever recorded.